this story I'm about to unfold took place back in the early 90s, just about the time of our conflict with Saddam and the Iraqis. I only mention it because sometimes there's a podcast. I won't say it's heroic, because what's a hero? But sometimes there's a podcast. And I'm talking about Rabbit Fighters here. Sometimes there's a podcast that, well, it's a podcast for its time and place. It just fits right in there. And that's the Rabbit Fighters on the interwebs.
The dude.
Cue music.
This is so good. The Rabbit Fighters abide.
I feel good that he's out there for all us sinners.
I did a show where of Mice and Men where I played this guy Slim, who's kind of like cowboy, and I had this like cowboy voice and stuff, and he's like a really chill guy. And one of the reviewers, the main reviewer from the Chicago Tribune, was like, yeah, he liked my performance, and he said he reminds one of a real cowboy, like Sam Elliott. And I was like,
a real cowboy.
That's high praise. I was like, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten. He said I sound like Sam Elliott.
Yeah, I have a kid's book that I used to read. Well, they're a little old now, but Cowboy and Octopus.
Cowboy. Oh yeah.
I always enjoyed doing that one because I could do the cowboy accents on every page. Kids always dug it.
Yeah, I love reading kids book, books are my kids and doing the voices and stuff. It's always fun.
I just do that by myself. I don't have kids. I just read to myself in accents.
You gotta workshop that material somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. Shower's as good a place as
there, man. Yeah. Shower by yourself.
I have another podcast where that's all I do. I just
Brian in the shower with a foggy mirror.
All right. Well, there are no cowboys in this film that we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going on a mind, time, and narrative-bending journey into Christopher Nolan's 2020 film, Tenet. Christopher Nolan, known for Memento, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and of course last year's multi-Oscar winning Oppenheimer. He likes his laws of nature to be mere suggestions, his locations exotic, and his leading characters brooding. It stars John David Washington of BlacKkKlansman and The Creator, also from last year, Robert Pattinson of Twilight and The Batman, Elizabeth Debicki of The Great Gatsby and Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2, apparently.
Okay.
Michael Caine.
Like blue makeup or something. Where the hell?
Michael Caine of being just Michael goddamn Caine, and Kenneth Branagh of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Wild Wild West, and also like Macbeth and like a dozen other Shakespeare adaptations over the years. So, yeah, he's like
we're not in a theater, so you can say Macbeth. It's cool. Nothing.
That's Scottish play.
A beam won't fall on your head. I like how you called him Kenneth Branagh.
Isn't that how it's pronounced?
No, it's Kenneth Branagh.
I like Branagh better.
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably he has some Germanic background where it's like Kenneth Branagh or
Beautiful
Dutch.
Language. Beautiful.
It's the flower of languages.
Well, Tenet was released at the height of the pandemic and netted $365 million worldwide, and
Lord,
like the Pixies, was far more popular overseas than in the U.S. And unlike the Pixies, there's no references to slicing up eyeballs, only slicing up my patience. Waka waka waka. So I'd only seen about half of this movie like last year. I don't know why I turned it off. I just kind of like lost interest or something else was going on. And Greg, have you seen this one before?
No, I'd never seen it. I wasn't even aware of it really. Actually,
this is a first time for both of us. So Brian put this on the list of movies that Rabbit Fighters got to discuss. So shall we go ahead and grade this sucker?
We're already done.
No, we're doing it backwards.
Exactly. Joshua has the blue armband
on. What's up with this movie, Brian? You suggested this. You gave it your vote of confidence that it'd be worth talking about. So lead us in, man.
I did. I think part of it was spurred on by Oppenheimer, which I haven't seen. I still want to see, but I remember talking about this film with a friend of mine, back and forth, and it's just a cool movie. And we hadn't really done kind of like a time-based type film, kind of a heady movie that kind of bears worthy of rewatching a couple times. To
But Limp It, dude. Come on.
Yeah, that's true.
B movie
That's
was
true.
just a mind bender. I mean, what was going on there?
So I was thinking, I want sometime I wanted to rewatch it, but it's also one of those films where I like to think that I got it the first time, and then I'm like, wait, and then I rewatched it. I was like,
too.
I think I got this figured out. Like, so, but yeah, it's just kind of a cool movie to talk about and wrap your head around, in terms of, what's actually happening, why, and all those type of things. And also, catalyst for this was that Greg watches everything twice. So I'm like, I want to find a movie that he has to watch twice to get this thing
Doesn't make
nailed
sense
down.
unless you watched it a second time.
Well, then it would stand to reason I'd watch it 3 or 4 times.
That's true.
If I watched
That's
B
true.
movie twice and The Incredible Mr. Limpet twice, you would stand to reason.
That's just unnecessary.
Well, it's like, my memory stinks too. So like I always watch it the first time as kind of like a wash, where you're like the overall impression of the movie, sits with you, and then you can come back and watch it again and be like, oh, this is fucking dumb. Oh my God, I didn't even notice this stupid thing, or like, oh, that's cool, that's funny, so yeah.
Yeah. And enough time had passed where I didn't remember much of. I remember the overarching plot, but not all the time components and kind of how it all fits together. So it was kind of fun to watch it, having like an understanding of, I know what's I think is going to happen, but it had been long enough where I'm like, oh wait, what? Like, so it was cool, and it's been a couple of years since I watched it, but
let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's get behind ourselves. And someone want to explain what this movie is about to...
Wait, we need to do a temporal pincer where Brian explains from the future to now what it's about, and I explain from the past to now what it's about, and then we meet at the end of the episode at the exact moment, and we have to synchronize our watches for 50 minutes from now. So
it needs to be one of you two, because I have no confidence that I can explain. I was watching it again about 30 minutes ago, like the ending up until like 30 minutes ago, and my wife walked in and she's like, it's the battle scene at the end, and I'm like trying to explain this and this, and I'm like, this doesn't even make sense to me. Like,
she's like, put it down. You need to step away from the movie. No, but like, wait a minute. How many Robert Pattinsons are in this? Is he in here 4 times or 6 times? I have to know.
I mean, that's why it costs so much money to make. You
have to hire Robert Pattinson 4 times.
Well, you got to film everything twice, just forward and reverse.
Exactly.
I don't know if I could do a good job of explaining it unless I just walk through the whole movie in my head.
Do it.
But
show us what you got.
But maybe Greg can help supplement it. Yeah. The film starts with kind of a failed CIA operation at an opera house.
In fake Ukraine.
where our
allegedly real Ukraine.
Our character, who's only known throughout the entire film as the protagonist, is there and basically trying. I already lost the plot. Like I forget what the fuck he's even doing.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
He's there because
he thinks he's there for a reason. Yeah,
they have come there to get this guy who's an asset, and the guy who's the asset has the information about where one of the pieces of that 9-piece Lego of death, the math Lego of death, is. Because the math Lego of death has been split into 9 pieces like the Infinity Stones and scattered across the galaxy, or nuclear sites across the world. And they go to the opera house because this assault on the opera house is staged as fake, when the only operative that they want to kill that guy who's the asset that has the piece of the math Lego of death. So they're going to murder thousands of people probably to make it look like a terrorist attack, when really all they wanted is to kill that one guy and take the piece of the math Lego of death.
Which is like Tuesday in Russia.
Exactly. Yeah. Or Ukraine, which is, a wash now. So yeah, that's what he's there for. He's there to get the math Lego of death and get the operative who, the piece of it, math Lego of death, and get the operative out of there with the piece.
Gotcha. In the math Lego of death is actually plutonium, which is one of
But
9
is it plutonium
pieces.
in actuality? They
That's
call
what
it
they say,
plutonium, but it is in fact not plutonium. It is part of an algorithm, and they call it plutonium to
No,
keep
but
people away
that
from it.
component was plutonium-241.
But they call it that.
Yeah.
It isn't.
No,
They're saying it
was.
isn't made
It's
of
like,
plutonium. They're like, there is no plutonium in this thing, but they've referred to it as plutonium the entire time to make people think it was part of a bomb or something
But I
radioactive.
thought later in the movie she confirmed it was plutonium. Okay.
I thought it was actually like plutonium-241, but not the other 8 pieces aren't that. It's like only one piece of the 9-piece puzzle, and that piece happens
If there's
to be
anyone in the
plutonium
audience
that
who is still
part of the
listening at this
bomb.
point, like I think you can see the problem with this film.
See, and this is why this is a great movie, because it's so fucking like
What?
I mean, it makes sense, but it's also very
I
complicated.
edited the last 2, so I'm not it for this one.
That doesn't give you permission to just go off on wild tangents.
No, but like, my understanding was that it isn't plutonium, but they buried it in nuclear sites and called it plutonium because they wanted people to be afraid of it so that they wouldn't go after it.
Okay.
That was my understanding of
That
it.
follows. And
then like
Okay.
way into the movie, they reveal that it, because they keep thinking it's pieces of a bomb or pieces of, some detonation device. And way into the movie, Singh, the weapons dealer, explains to him, it isn't plutonium. That's just what we call it, but it's part of this crazy algorithm that if you put it all together, all 9 pieces put together, can cause the end of the world.
that future Oppenheimer created.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Future Oppenheimer
So-
kills herself because she created this thing and she doesn't want people to be able to get to her.
So the protagonist, after he retrieves this thing, is caught and then basically is tortured until he decides to take a cyanide capsule to kill himself, to not spill trade secrets from the CIA. Turns out he wakes up and it's a test, and he's brought into then recruited for a special operations mission called Tenet, right? And the whole purpose of Tenet is to stop this essentially a Russian oligarch from accumulating 9 pieces of the quote unquote algorithm that you don't find out until later that is going to end the world. So he has to move through time. And this whole thing, basically what he finds out is that scientists way in the future have invented a way to reverse entropy, which essentially to send things back in time. So they're essentially dead dropping information and money to this Russian oligarch who is searching for these 9 pieces that, as Greg mentioned, creates the Lego of death to end the world, essentially a la, Thanos.
Yeah, or like any of those
Fist crush,
fanciful movies where there's a bunch of stones that get divided. Yeah.
So the protagonist starts off thinking he's solving for one thing and not realizing that what he's really doing is trying to prevent this one guy from gaining the last piece of the puzzle, because some future scientists developed essentially a bomb, and kind of via sort of like Oppenheimer type thing, and decided to because of what she created, went ahead and killed herself and dispersed these 9 pieces of the puzzle all across the globe. So no one knows what they're at. However, they've now sent all these things back in time to this guy who, long story short, I guess, was at the right place at the right time in Russia during the Cold War, and happened to stumble upon the dead drop with a note in it,
Or was he
and a bunch of
always
money,
meant to?
which
And gold bricks. Gold bricks. Yep.
yeah, some gold bricks essentially, which would then fund this entire rich operation, with the farce that he's like a Russian oligarch made his money doing natural gas or something like that, which isn't accurate. So it's essentially the future funding this project for him to go find all this stuff. But, as the movie progresses, it's a whole mind-bending experience of like going back and forward in time to figure out what's happening and how to stop him, and then the whole kicker of the thing is that he's essentially a dead man switch for this bomb. So you can't just end the movie by finding this guy and killing him before he stops it, because he's essentially wearing an evil Fitbit.
The oligarch guy, the Russian oligarch. Yeah.
The oligarch guy is wearing a Fitbit essentially that's tracking his heart rate. And if his heart stops, the bomb prematurely detonates.
It's like the
So you
movie
can't kill him.
Speed, but with a Fitbit.
Yeah.
if it goes to 0, the bomb goes off.
You don't really find that out. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing a huge plot and we can talk about it. But yeah, the point is like he can't just go back in time or forward in time, whatever, and just shoot the guy in the head and the whole movie ends. Because if he dies, the bomb goes off and everybody dies. So the whole plan is essentially to find and disassemble the algorithm without him knowing, because he's going to essentially kill himself because he's dying anyway. The oligarch's dying of cancer, so his plan is to kill himself in one happy memory place.
But there's some color in there too.
Oh, of course,
so when we say that you can go forward and back in time, it's not like jumping forward and jumping back. You can't be like, I want to go to 1955. I want to go to 2173. It's like pressing the rewind or fast forward with one click, not 3 clicks. So you can go, if you want to go back,
time only goes one speed.
Yeah, if you want to go back 5 seconds, you have to wait 5 seconds for the time, in real time to go back 5 seconds in the plot. So like, if you want to go back a week, you have to dedicate a week of your life to sitting there while time goes backward a week, and then you can hop off and get to the thing that you wanted to get to in a week. So you can't just diabolically like jump back and forward in time and cause havoc. You have to really, really want it. If you want to go back years, you have to give up years of your life to rewind to a certain spot in time and hop off, like it's a tram that goes really slowly, and you can hop on and hop off.
And you can't stop. You can't like return without entering one of these mechanisms. So if you go back in time too far, you've passed by any opportunity to reverse time, and ostensibly you just continue going back in time until you die.
Yeah. And if the same thing with going to the future,
like
if you want to go to the future, you have to sit there and wait for the amount of time that it would take to get there. So like
so wait, okay, maybe I missed that part, because I understand that that's kind of what's happening when he's sitting in, I think it's like a light tower and stuff like that. He's essentially waiting for time to pass so he can catch up to himself.
But he doesn't know that at that point.
So yeah, and he does it twice. Same thing when they're in the shipping container, right?
When
so they're like,
save Cat,
and they have to go back in time, because apparently getting shot with a bullet that's going in reverse is more deadly than one going forward. Right. So they take her through the turnstile.
Because it's a mushroomed bullet.
So this movie is very complicated, and it's very hard to talk about because it's doing a timeline of it is very difficult, and we're missing this whole part about how they break into a free port, into an airport, and discover a turnstile, and the protagonists fight themselves.
Yeah. Also, what is a free port? Because nobody knows what a fucking free port is. Yeah, it's like
essentially a place in an airport that you can store high
like a
valuable
party city on the
so
Gulf.
you don't have to pay taxes on.
It's like
which these things do exist.
Billions of dollars of art stored in airports, which are in like no man's land, and if you cross the border of some country with these expensive paintings, you'd have to pay taxes on them. But instead, they hold them in these warehouses in an airport between two countries, and so billionaires can come in and look at their really fancy, expensive art anytime they want to, and not pay taxes on them ever. And they're highly guarded, so no one can steal them, supposedly.
Yeah, and it's like a lockdown hole, but it's they're ostensibly there to, I know, to get a painting that is not even there, so that they can then entice the Russian oligarch's wife to get involved in this whole thing. But it's not there anyways. But breaking into this whole free port to this massive, elaborate scheme, through essentially crashing a jet into the thing, like they discover this turnstile that is one of the few turnstiles. I guess they're placed out throughout the world,
several of them,
and where they can be at. Yeah, and they discover this, and as they discover it, somebody comes through, and you find out later in the film that it's themselves coming through, and they end up fighting into these really cool like reverse fight scenes. And
like there's not a lot about this movie that I felt like was obvious, which is, I think, intentionally is so. But that fight scene in the airport where it turns out they're fighting themselves, I felt was super obvious. Like the second Robert Pattinson throws him down and they don't show his face. I'm like, oh well, it's obviously fucking them.
I thought the same thing. But I thought this. The only thing I got
reason
wrong,
you're not seeing their faces.
The only thing I got wrong in that was that I thought Robert Pattinson was fighting Robert Pattinson, and that John David Washington was fighting himself. So I thought they were each fighting versions of themselves. I was like, why are there 3 John David Washingtons and 1 Robert Pattinson? Whatever the fuck, man. But I felt like, and those fight sequences are neat, but I would have wanted this. I think that fight sequence where they're fighting each other would have been cooler if it had happened James Bond movie style, where they put a fight sequence in the beginning of the movie. They have an elaborate fight sequence that's really action packed, and then they hit the credits, and then they start with the plot. Like they have this slam bang, like airplane parachuting, like shooting action scene, and then they have the credits, and then it cuts to like M telling him why he just went through that crap and what the mission is. You know, I feel like if they started with an inverted fight and everyone was like, what the fuck is this? Why are people going backwards? What the hell? It would have been cooler. And then, you know, gradually explain it later as the movie goes on. As it is,
I think
they explain the conceit really early, and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess this is interesting. And then you see the fight, and you're like, when you see the fight after it's explained, I was like, he's fighting himself because they explained it, you know?
So he knows all his moves.
Yeah, exactly. And like, he's not tricking him anyway and stuff like that. So I did feel like you did. I guessed it, you know? I think it would have been cool if they had
that wasn't like a huge reveal, but
first. That would have been pretty neat.
Yeah. I mean, that came along pretty far to the movie that you know what's happening. And so it's like everything has been explained. It's at least an hour plus in where they explain
the rest is like,
and then he has to
still
go back,
trying to figure out.
They explain really early the scientist, the woman scientist who explains to him the back.
No. I'm saying that fight scene, that secondary fight scene comes really later in the movie. So you kind of know it's coming.
Right.
Like
but because this movie is such a slice and dice movie, they could have put it anywhere. They could have started the movie with it, and it wouldn't have fucked up the plot line or anything. It would have introduced the concept of forward backward without explaining it, and set up a situation of mystery that you then fall into, instead of like you meet a couple people, they explain the whole fucking conceit, and then you're like, oh, this guy's fighting himself. He's probably fighting himself again.
I think the comparison to a Bond film is really kind of spot on, because as watching it, I'm like, this is essentially a Bond movie of a type. And after the fact, looked it up, and he was very inspired by the Bond movies and wanted to make a Bond-esque movie, but to the point where he didn't want to like be overly influenced by it. So he, during the filming and leading up to the filming, he did not watch any Bond movies, because he just wanted to do it from memory, from like the feeling of a Bond movie. Yeah. So from all the exotic locations and the Amalfi scene of the Amalfi Coast, and then the opera.
Yeah.
I mean, sailing. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that was in Estonia. Tallinn.
Tallinn,
that's unusual. It's an unusual location to have anything shot. That was neat. I like that stuff.
Shots in India. There's
they were all over the place. But yeah, it was a little bit of Bond, a little bit of Mission Impossible. Like, you know, the whole like reverse.
I was going to say the reverse bungee jump totally had Mission Impossible on it. Yeah, I felt the same way. Where you're like, that's such a Tom Cruise sequence, right? It was
so ridiculous, so over the top.
I love that. I love
bungee jumping.
I love how it looked when they were like gliding up the side of this building. You know, like when these huge like frog hops that just look really effortless. I was like, that looks fucking cool. Plus, I loved it when he's talking to Singh and all the security starts arriving at the base of the building, and she's like, surely you've thought a way out of this. And he's like, not one that I'm in love with. and then he jumps off the side of the building. No, not one that I love is what he said. Not one that I love.
Yeah. Boo. I thought he was good in this. I think all the actors, the casting is good. The only thing I probably think could give or take would be the wife. And I don't mind her as an actor. She was also in a show called The Night Manager, and she's been in some other stuff, but I didn't really like it this huge. I think you could have put anyone in that part in a sense. Like,
they wrote the part for
the guy playing.
They originally had the character, I think, being a little older or something like that, and then she came in and auditioned, and they were like, "You're perfect. You're awesome. We're going to rewrite a ton of the character for you."
I liked her a lot. I liked her
too, but I just was just like,
I did feel like a lot of people could have played that part for sure. I feel like a bunch of people could have played the John David Washington part too. I thought he was a good choice. He was like good, but I wasn't like, wow, I'm really impressed with this guy. I thought he was good.
Yeah.
I thought Robert Pattinson had more charisma, more stuff to do.
I like Robert Pattinson
Yeah,
in almost
I think
everything.
he's good,
he does.
man.
I think he played a good sidekick.
Michael Caine was good. I like some of the.
Michael Caine was.
Yeah,
like
I know.
throwaway.
Michael
like,
Caine.
They had Michael Caine just to have Michael Caine in the movie.
Yeah.
He's like, we got to have a Michael Caine scene. I love that scene though. That scene was great.
India,
He's like,
sign me up.
so many good lines in that where he's like,
there
he's
were.
like, in a world of people trying to be billionaires, Brooks Brothers ain't gonna cut it. And he's like, may I recommend a good tailor? And he's like, nah, thanks. You British don't have a monopoly on snobbery. And he's like, more of a controlling interest. That's a great line.
I like the. Yeah, and the maitre d' where he's like, can you box it up? Or he's like, most certainly not.
That was a good
And he did it just to have the guys just to make the guys say certainly not, because he knew the guy wasn't going to box. He's like, I don't suppose you can box it up for me.
Yeah, that fight scene in the kitchen where he walks in. He's like, I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago. That was apparently ad-libbed.
Oh, really? That's funny.
right before the punches started getting thrown.
It sounded like it was ad-libbed for sure. Yeah, there's some good sequences there. Yeah, I love that sequence with the kitchen fight where like that's a badass scene, man, because like that's where this guy gets to show off a little bit, right? John David Washington gets to be like come into his own a little bit and be kind of a badass. And I love that. It reminds me of the Bourne movies where they have all this close quarters, and then the Bourne movies kind of stole this from Jackie Chan movies where everything around you is a weapon, a potential weapon, and you improvise and you just pick up whatever's near you. If it's a rolling pin, you're fighting this guy with a rolling pin because it's all you got. But Bourne really took that to a much more violent level. Bourne took that these close quarters. You have nowhere to move. You're like in a laundry room or a kitchen or a bathroom. Like you got nowhere to go, and there's a violent, deadly person in your face. So you pick up a cheese grater and beat the fuck out of a guy with a cheese grater. I was like, oh shit, this is great. And then he like grabs the side of a door handle on a doorway and 2 foot kicks a guy through the door. I was like, that's a fucking awesome scene. The guy just like falls down the stairs and then he like fixes his coat as he's walking out the alley. I was like,
he buttons his jacket.
That is a signature scene for this guy. But then he didn't get that many more of those.
So the way they explained it, and you guys can correct me because I'm sure you understood it better than I did. The danger here was that, so they started sending all these things inverted back through time. And so with a small amount of things, our time is still flowing in the right direction. And so it's overwhelming all those inverted things. So it's not really causing too much damage. But the danger is that if either enough things come through or a big enough like force, which I guess is the bomb, it would reverse time permanently, which would wipe out everyone in existence.
It would roll back time until there was no time, and there would only be what was considered the future. So if I draw a line in the sand and the ocean comes and washes over all the crap that was up to that line and pulls it back, then, only the line in the sand that's heading into shore, is what exists. So what it's saying is like, it rolls back until the beginning of time, until there is no past. And then the future is the only time that exists. Like what would be for us, the future.
But
that's a much longer time scale than I was envisioning. Cause he was like, he was going to kill himself, but he was also saying that
in the future,
life will go on.
But the future is like, so the future's mad at the past because the future's like, hey, you fucking destroyed the world.
Yeah.
Climate change, the rivers are
climate change and all that.
Yeah. The sky is dying, whatever the hell. And we're mad. We need you to not exist. So what we're going to do is put something together that wipes out all of the past so that we start fresh from life starting in a very evolved future. So,
but they bring this into a point because they talk about, what is it, like the grandfather paradox, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does that not take place here? Where if you kill someone in the past, the future can't exist. I mean, how does that
they don't explain it. They don't explain it well
So-
because they talk about the grandfather paradox because they know people who watch the movie and that are critics will talk about the grandfather paradox, but they don't adequately explain. For instance, John David Washington ends up becoming the head of Tenet.
Yeah. He sends
And it's this
essentially,
big-
he sets
and he
himself on this
sends-
whole thing.
He sends himself back in time to, to go through the experiences he needs to go through to be able to start Tenet, right? So Tenet doesn't exist without John David Washington. John David Washington doesn't exist without himself sending himself back in time to create Tenet. But when he goes to the opera house to try to, get the asset and bring the Lego piece out of there, he
Recruit
has
himself.
people, future John David Washington is like, I know what to do. I'll have people come in, try to kill him again and again and again, and they might succeed, and murder a bunch of people. And then when he escapes, I'll have them pull my own fucking teeth out with pliers and then make myself take a cyanide capsule that makes me think I'm going to die. And that's how I'll prove to myself that I'm ready to do the Tenet thing, which I already know I'm going to do because I've created it and I'm the head of it.
Yeah.
Why would you have people try to kill you and pull your fucking teeth out with pliers, which is the worst torture I can think of,
Well,
frankly.
I did read, I was thinking about this somewhere, that he essentially has to go through, like you're saying, the motions and the interactions with individuals that will make this thing move forward. So he
needs
has
to pull his teeth out?
I don't know. I mean, but is that what
Really?
sets the chain of events for that one guy to then recruit him into this thing and then move it forward, right? So like, yeah,
Well, the
I don't know if
cyanide
it needs to,
capsule.
yeah, the capsule part, but I don't know
The
if it
capsule
really,
is
I mean, the torture part, I don't know. Maybe that's
because the guy,
So you're saying that's not really when he was recruited?
because
he
yeah.
is the whole the point of the program.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, I got that from the future.
Yeah.
But is that not his starting point in the past? Or are you saying is like his memory was wiped? Like,
well, it hasn't happened yet for him. So for past John David Washington,
but it is happening
yeah,
for him.
exactly. This is what I'm saying. They don't explain the grandfather paradox because like they let all kinds of incoherent shit happen that wouldn't be able to happen if the grandfather paradox existed. So they create
Yeah.
these illogical.
Robert Pattinson sort of explained it.
yeah,
He was
and
just like,
he's
it doesn't matter
a
whether it
master
is or
of
not. They
physics.
believe it is, so
Yeah,
therefore.
I like how they
and
make
I
him
know
a
stuff.
physicist in it so that he gives it
Yeah.
some sort of like credential,
Yeah.
like credit in his explanation. But a lot of his explanation is just like, just go with it.
Yeah, I know.
All
yeah.
right. Like,
Yeah, which is telling the audience, just shut up and
Yeah.
stop asking questions.
just enjoy it. Don't ask questions.
Yeah. And they have the Pattinson character. I will say this a lot.
Neil.
One of my issues with the writing in this movie is it sounds like one giant monologue that was divided among a bunch of people so that it can be a conversation. Like a lot of these people have conversations where they both sound exactly the same as each other, and they both are finishing each other's sentences. Like someone's like, what about free will? No, there's no free. Don't think about that. But this, but that, but this, but that. It's like one guy, it's like Forrest Gump hitting the ping pong ball against the wall again and again so he can play ping pong with himself.
Yeah. Where a real conversation would be like free will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't think so. I had those same doubts
Everyone
too, but
talks with
this is
razor sharp precision and like straight to the point. And they all are in agreement about what they're talking about. And no one thinks this is fucking crazy.
And there's a whole component with Neil where
Yeah.
he essentially saves his life like twice or something. But
is Neil Max?
It is not confirmed that Neil is Max. Many people have said that they think Neil is Max, and then John David Washington was like, "Oh, I like that fan theory. That's a good fan theory." So people are like
So
now saying,
I thought
that
it was
it's
imagining
canon.
that. Like it was like that's like him.
It
right?
could be. It's interesting if it is him, but also then this guy,
as interesting as anything else in this
Then-
goddamn movie.
future Neil, has to wait like 35 fucking years. He has to rewind himself like 35 years to come back and save the protagonist's ass in what we would call the present. So like future Neil, he's like, I know you drink Diet Cokes. I know all this stuff about what happens in the future. He has all this stuff in his head already because he's already lived it, because he's rewound himself 35 or 40 years or however old he's supposed to be after
Which is
the
why he
age
looks
of
so
Max. Yeah, it's just why he's so like smarmy and know-it-all-y, I guess. But yeah,
I like
I
his
did too.
character.
I like I said smarmy, but like I mean like he's got like a smirk on his face sometimes. He's some of the only comedy in this movie.
I read that he doesn't like to do British accents because he is British and he feels like he's just doing himself. So he actually based the whole mannerisms of that character off Christopher Hitchens, which I thought was a really interesting choice. He was a British journalist and sort of ideologue, and he always got into fights with like priests and stuff.
I know who that is now. Yeah.
He picked a fight with Mother Teresa.
I know who you're talking about now.
It was kind of fun.
But Pattinson's Scottish, isn't he? Isn't he Scottish?
I have no idea.
I think he's Scottish. I don't know.
He has an accent from the Sceptred Isles. I have no idea where he's from, but
either way, yeah.
Because he does this. So he's at the beginning. He's wearing because he's at the opera house, right? He's got the little thing on his backpack.
Yep.
So that's him.
The red cord
saves him, but then he's there at the end as like he essentially dies, right? So
yes,
he gives
he
himself
sacrifices
up.
himself a couple times. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get
a couple times.
Yeah. he dies. He dies several.
Is he going?
He dies several times over because like you see him dead with the backpack when they're trying to get the Lego of death. They're trying to have him not explode it and bury it.
And he's having a phone call with him from 14 days,
and he's dead there. And then they're trying to get something. They have a hand grenade on him or something, and then he comes back from behind him and blocks the shot where they almost kill the protagonist. And then they get he drags the protagonist and the other guy out of there with a car, like on that rope, and that weird scene where he like drags him and then everything blows up. And then he's like, gotta go back in and die again.
He's like looping through.
He's going
through He's going through
turnstiles. Like a ton of Robert
that's what I mean.
Pattinsons
There's like a million Robert Pattinsons in this movie.
That's why he's both in Twilight.
Right. Exactly. That's how he can do all these things.
That's how he gets the Goblet of Fire.
But if he is the kid, if he's Max, or whatever, Maximilian, then he's in the movie with his mom as a kid and also as the agent. And then at some point he would exist as Max the kid. He would exist as the corpse on the floor who sacrificed himself for the protagonist before the bomb went off. He would also exist as himself going back in to make sure that he got into the mine on time to save Robert, the protagonist from the shooter. And I think that's as many times. And he might be in the fight sequence in the Freeport as well at the same time.
And you didn't explain who Max is, but he's the child that
Max is the child of Sator, the Russian oligarch's wife.
Can I just back up for a second, because the thing that really, really more so, there were two things that bothered me above all. One is that, okay, so Kat gets shot reverse time and she's like on a gurney, and then Robert Pattinson's explaining like what happens if time flows backwards, and they were like, well, what happens if that happens? And Robert Pattinson's like, end of play, like really like apocalyptic, and he's like, everybody who ever existed dies. Yeah. And her response is, even my son. Like, fucking son. What?
No, not him. He's the Messiah.
He's special. Like, who wrote that line?
You know what line bugs me is when the lady scientist who's telling him about entropy and all that stuff. She's like, we're here to tell you about something very serious, and he's like, nuclear holocaust, and she's like, worse. Like, no, there's nothing worse than there's nothing worse than a nuclear holocaust, because if there's he's like, what it's worse than that, because we're going to roll back and all of time before the future will be wiped out and nothing will ever have existed. I'm like, guess what happens if there's a nuclear holocaust now? Everything is destroyed and there will be no future because the future is destroyed because the entire world is a fucking smoking ruins, you idiot.
And then
so no, it isn't worse than a nuclear holocaust.
And
It's
then
way
out
less
from
worse.
the depths, Godzilla comes out of it. Through
50 stories high, I hear. And maybe even Godzuki.
The second thing that it didn't really bother me, but it did kind of bother me. But I had to look it up afterwards. But you know, the fights, the big army invasion scene at the end. There, we got the two different groups going back, and Robert Pattinson's like driving the Humvee, and he's honking the horn. I was like, do Humvees in the field have horns?
That's what bothered
me. It would be a tactical disadvantage to have. Like, what if you accidentally lean on it during a night mission?
A Russian tank cuts you off. You're like, hey, buddy.
Like, oh,
I'm trying to start a war here. Get out of my way.
Yeah. So I looked it up, and they actually do have horns, but they're not on by default because of that same thing. On those,
you got to really want it,
but yeah, you gotta
be like a New Yorker. Hey, the thing doesn't have a horn. I got to put a horn in this fucking thing, right? I can't drive it.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. He's like honking the horn.
What if a kid runs in the way? I got to be able to honk at him and flip him off.
I'm curious to know. Well, one, did we miss anything? I'm sure we missed a lot, but two,
a lot.
In these type of movies, is the juice worth the squeeze in terms of the the mind?
Is that a phrase?
Definitely.
I like that.
You know, in the sense, like, I like movies like this because they make me think, but then I get so twisted like a pretzel that I'm like, if I have to think this hard, is that good or bad? Like, does that make it, just is like you get to a point where it's confusing, but does that mean it's like intellectually complicated? You're like, wait, no, or it's just fucking confusing. It's kind of like the David Lynch model where it's like, it's weird to be weird, but this is kind of like, this is confusing just to be confusing. But
no.
So Christopher Nolan had the idea for this movie like 20 years prior to it getting filmed. Like, he had been scribbling this down in notebooks for years and years and years and years. Like, this is, his opus of what he wanted to make, which is interesting because it didn't get as much love as like Oppenheimer.
The pandemic had a lot to do with that, though. It got released.
Yeah, it kind of squelched it. But I think I was reading like 365 million is what it gained, and at the time that was like really depressing. Yeah. They're like, oh, this should have gotten so much more. But looking back, that's actually incredible. A really amazing amount of money, because there aren't many blockbusters that can do that anymore.
And especially during the pandemic when people were streaming it for $20 for the whole family. Like, you know, like 8 people weren't, 4 or 5 people weren't going and paying $20 each.
Yeah. But I liked the action sequences. I really, I enjoyed the locations. I feel like it was beautifully shot. It was clear there was a lot of love put into this. The fact that he filmed everybody running forward and running backward for every scene to like get enough tape to make sure like everything worked correctly. What's his name? Kenneth
Branagh.
Kenneth Branagh memorized lines in Russian backward.
Oh yeah. That sounds like it's something.
And had to like say them backward in Russian. I mean, it's pretty astounding. The lengths that they went through in order to make this movie.
Something up here.
Okay, back to my original question: is the juice worth the squeeze?
Is the juice worth the squeeze
in this movie? Like all the the questions and the confusion. Like, sometimes I wonder, does that make it a good movie? Or I mean, I think the movie is well done regardless. To your point, exactly, as because of the director, and I don't think, like you said, he does. I don't think he does anything by mistake. He's very methodical, and I think he enjoys the unraveling of everything and the tanglements. So to me, I feel like it's when it's done on purpose, it's better than, because it makes me feel stupid sometimes where I'm like, what the fuck? Am I not getting this? But then I'm also realizing that, they kind of drop in some, it's okay if you don't get it lines and you're like, I'm just suspension of disbelief in this component. All right, we're moving forward. So, but regardless, it was cool. Yeah.
Don't think too hard on it, dummy. You're not going to get it.
And that's, I think that's less of the director not knowing how to handle something and more being like, we have to move the plot forward. Yeah. We can't have a 12 and a half minute monologue about how this fucking thing works that we're barely going to touch on later in the movie. I think it's just expediency.
Which overall, it's a valiant attempt to continue to move it forward, despite everything that's dropping off of it and latching onto it at all points.
And I have to say, the second time I watched it, I was like, oh God, how much fucking time is left in this movie? Because I'm up late already, you know, and I'm like, God damn, I'm going to keep stopping this thing too, because, you know, I got to figure out what the fuck is going on.
It's a good thing it's a pretty movie, because if it was not shot that well.
I know, yeah. But
you know,
okay,
we didn't even introduce ourselves at the beginning. But,
oh yeah,
but whatever.
Well, welcome to Rocket Fighters.
Well, that makes sense though, right? Because we're doing it at the end instead of the beginning.
It's true.
And we'll do it backward.
Yeah. I'll just make the hand gesture. And I'm Brian. And we live in a Twilight world. No friends at dusk. I was like, I tried to look that up. Does that mean anything? But it doesn't really.
No, that's like Flash and Thunder in World War II.
We live in a Twilight world. Yeah, we should rate it though. I'm just picturing Greg in the screening theater behind Christopher Nolan going, bullshit. Doesn't make sense.
Nope. Bullshit.
Hey, Chris. Bullshit.
It's like Pearl watching B movie. Yeah. Nope. Dead. Nope. Dead.
Yeah.
Turnstile. Dead.
He
didn't see himself coming out. Dead.
Why did he come back 5 times? No.
Josh was like, dear God, let's grade this. I'm ready to go to bed.
Yeah, but I just thought of that. I was just like, yeah.
We're going to have a lot of Turnstile songs on the companion.
How about For the Turnstiles by Neil Young? That's a good song.
What about the entire Revolver album?
For the Turnstiles, you can really...
Okay.
Would you like to go first?
Grading this. Is this on a scale of F-, Germany, 1949, to A+, Holland, 1945.
I like that neutral hotel reference there. Yeah, that's a great song.
Also, sort of
the only girl I ever loved.
Joshua, I would like for you.
Where's the fall
first?
I can go, but I actually don't really know how I feel about this.
I've already seen his review, and it isn't good.
Would you like to defer?
No, I was totally like live streaming like my reactions to it as I was watching it with you guys, or was to you guys while I was watching it, and that was on the first viewing, and there was a lot of bullshit. I was just like, "What the fuck is going on? This is like the sailing scene." I still don't on like multiple watches. Scene. I'm like, you know what, man? I don't like this lifestyles of the rich and famous.
It's also just a stupid, unnecessary scene. It's just like another way to get they're just. It's another way to get exposition out. You know, this is what they teach you in film school. If you have exposition, make it active. So he's like, I'll put it on some racing sailboats where they talk about shit.
And then I found out that it was Kenneth Branagh's. Those are his boats.
Of course
he owns them. Yeah, so he wanted to fucking show them.
Who doesn't have a couple of catamarans?
And then they come up on the foils and they come out of the water. I'm like, fuck this shit. This is dumb. So there was like that aspect of it, and then coming back and watching it a second time, I'm like, okay, I feel like there was some stuff I missed, either because I was just bored or just I left the room at that wrong time where they explained the Fitbits. The Fitbit's doing it. If the Fitbit's the dead thing, I was like, I guess I missed it that time. I was like, oh, the Fitbit. Yeah, they said it that time. I don't know why I missed it the first time. That's the key to the whole thing, because he was like, all I remembered was like, I'm going to eat the cyanide pill and then the world will end. And I'm like, huh? That doesn't follow.
It's like my dad was, huh?
So if he takes the Advil, the world ends. Like, what?
Is that the Tylenol they poisoned in the 80s?
Yeah.
And it came back in time?
He takes the Tylenol PM, falls asleep, world ends, boom.
It's poison.
It's a metaphor for pharmaceuticals going out of control.
Big Pharma is responsible for everything.
So going into the recording of this podcast, I was definitely going to rate it much lower. But as we're talking about it, it occurred to me that I actually really would be interested in seeing more from the future. Like, because I was thinking they're never going to do a sequel. And no one's ever going to remake this.
No.
Ever.
No.
Like,
no.
Ever. No, like, it's been done. And so, like, this is the end. But then I was like, you know what? We haven't seen any of the people in the future sending this shit back and communicating, and any, like, that might be kind of interesting to see. And so just the mere thought of me being actually potentially
That's
interested in
what's
seeing
moved
that,
your needle.
I think I think it's moved it a little bit, because it's a beautifully shot movie. The action sequences overall are goodish. I mean, it's blatantly a most of the stuff's been done before in Tom Cruise movies, Mission Impossible,
James
and
Bond, for sure. Yeah.
And the like. I think the only difference is there's the time reversal mechanism, which is, it's kind of gimmicky. They had access to a reverse button a lot, and used that as the basis for a lot of it. But I respect that he had an idea, and for like 20 years of wanting to get this done. So I think I'm going to give it a B minus, because it's definitely not higher than that, because I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm not dumb. The movie is just overly complicated. Yep. And if I am dumb, then whatever.
Then so be it.
None of this matters anyway. So I yield my time.
I'm going to say, carrying from that, you don't have to be dumb to not get this movie. You know what I mean? Like, you can be smart and not get this movie. And the movie isn't wagging its dick in your face, like taunting you. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like,
look at you.
I know. Yeah. So that's what I mean. I feel like the movie isn't doing that. The movie isn't like, you're so fucking stupid, you don't even get what it means. I mean, I feel like
use that time went one way.
I feel like this
Idiot.
movie is like a lot of albums that I end up liking, where at first listen, I'm like, okay, that was something. And then I hear it again and I'm like, okay, that was something more. And I keep getting stuff out of it the more I listen to it. And then it becomes one of my favorite albums. Like there's this band Granddaddy that has this really simple seeming album of weird songs. And I've listened to it a million times. And it's got its hooks into me, but it took a while to reveal itself. And, it had nothing to do with them trying to conceal things from me not getting things at first, me being stupid, them being, elitist and, trying to make something that I wouldn't understand. It just comes down to someone making something complicated for the joy of making something complicated, and then allowing you to either be like, fuck this thing, man, it's trying to make me feel stupid, or be like, I'm going to give it another shot. So I feel like he created it for the right reasons. I don't feel like he was being like an intellectually superior person who was like, if you get it, then you get it. And if you don't, you can fuck off. And I feel like it's just up to us how to take it. And for me, I took it as like, out of all the crap that gets made, and there's so much crap that gets made, and we've reviewed some of these shitty movies on this podcast, like, this is not a crappy movie. This is a well-made movie. It's a smart fucking movie. It's made for the right reasons. It's well executed. It's well acted. It's well shot. The script is utterly fucking dense and incredibly smart. This guy is frighteningly fucking smart, Chris Nolan. And I think there are logical inconsistencies that let you know he's not perfect. He does stuff in the movie that frustrates me. That sailboat scene too. I was like, fuck this scene, man. This is dumb. And there are stuff like, why would he risk the world for a cat? Like, no, I don't buy it. But it's not enough for me to not like this movie and not appreciate and respect this movie. I really respect what this guy is trying to do with this movie and how he is trying to elevate storytelling with movie making and give you something that you don't just unwrap and see. It's not a Christmas present where you're like, ooh, what's in here? Oh, a thing. You're like, what's in here? Oh, it's a matrosha, right? It's like those Russian nesting dolls where you're like, fuck, how many layers has this thing got? When do I reach the end?
9
And when you
one
reach
is
the end,
exposed.
it opens up to a big one again. And you're like, what the fuck? There's no end to this thing. So yeah, I overall thought it was pretty damn great. It's frustrating. It can be maddening. Some of the details make me irritated, but it's really trying for big things, and it accomplishes most of them. And the stuff that I don't like is not enough to make me not like the movie. So I give it a B plus, probably maybe even A minus. I'm going to say A minus. It's that ambitious and it pulls that much of it off. And the stuff that bugs me isn't enough to overcome, the great stuff that it does. Goddamn, who's trying to make movies like this though? Who is trying to make these? There are so many rom-coms and stupid animated movies about talking bees and shit, like so many trash bin movies. And my kids always go to these gift shops when we go on trips and they try to buy stuff. And I say to them, this thing that you want for $2, it was built to go in the trash. This was pressed. It should come in a little trash can.
Its own trash can.
It's trash. Yeah, it's future trash. It's really like inverted trash where it's come back. It should start in the trash can and come out of there. And this movie is not that. This is swinging for the fences. I admire it sometimes more than I like it, but I also liked it too.
Well put, sir.
Brian,
I think there are a handful of directors that I really admire. I think Christopher Nolan is one of them. Like there are films that I get excited to see by them, right? Like Paul Thomas Anderson, Christopher Nolan, Scorsese, things like that. So, and I think because of a lot of what Greg said is just, he's intelligent, he's smart, he tries to make ambitious films. I think it's fun to try to unwind them in some cases. I think I don't think it's his best film by far. But it sort of reminded me a little bit of like Memento. Like it's a smart script and it's very, it doesn't have the same like, aha, plot twist, kind of thing, right. But it still is, it has a bit of a mechanism that you're trying to like untangle in a way. And it takes you on that journey. I picked it. I think it's fun to talk about. I don't think you come away with it. Maybe Joshua, not being glad you watched it. I think it's a good movie regardless of to your point where it's not trying to wag in your face like you're a moron, you just don't get it. It's kind of I think it's more of a begs you to rewind or watch again so that you can try to untwist it in a weird way, because I think that's kind of fun. So I give this I was B plus all the way, but then Greg threw A minus out there. But I think if I put it in terms of like his best films, I think this is a B plus. If Memento and Dunkirk, I'd probably give A's, things like that. The Dark Knight is an A plus.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
Batman Begins is an A.
Agree.
So
I don't think I've ever seen
Prestige is good too.
Prestige. It's good too. Yeah. I didn't even know it was his movie until partway in, and then I was like, that's why.
I don't know that I want to watch Inception again.
Yeah, I want to watch.
Interstellar's
Memento again. I haven't seen Memento.
That's been a long time since I saw that.
When I saw Memento, I was blown away by that movie. I was like, how the fuck did he make this? This is so goddamn good. So yeah, the fact that he's still doing movies like that complicated, that interesting, that way off the mainstream path, I really admire.
Yeah. I mean, Oppenheimer's a biopic.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's not complicated, but it's extremely well crafted. So I think it did deserve a bunch of the Oscars it won.
Yeah.
And that's me having seen it in the TV screen in the back of
a plane. A lot of people doing it in the movie.
Yes. But we can do the Oppenheimer episode.
Sorry, 12-year-old sitting next to me in the plane and his mom who's glaring at me.
Pugh, what are you doing?
Yeah, I'm always surprised they don't edit those for airplanes. It's kind of
Sexy
weird.
time on the
Yeah.
plane.
I had assumed they did,
Like,
but I was mistaken.
Kid Nexty's like, yeah.
You're like, I'm gonna have to watch this movie twice.
I need to see it.
It's
It's queued up. I got to check it out, but it's long,
Yeah, I
right?
wanna
It's like
see it
3
too.
hours or something.
It's really
But
long.
all his films are long, so
Yes,
that's the
it's-
difference. So, yeah, that's my grade.
Nice. All right. Well, next episode,
We all
what
know
are we doing?
what we're doing. It's your most excited.
We know what we're doing. Well, you know what we're doing?
Yeah, this is like Christmas part 2 for Joshua. He's got 3 of those buckets, those popcorn buckets. The dude.
They're all displayed next to each other in the window. So
We're going to discuss Dune Part 2 and Dune Part 1 because we haven't done that episode yet. So we're just going to bunch them into one and do Dune
We're gonna
Parts
try and
1
lynch
and
it?
2.
Like cram all
Yeah,
both of
yeah.
them to one.
Single
a
episode.
lot of exposition. We'll have a lot of exposition.
Because I feel like we already talked about the Lynch version. So a lot of like the discussion about what it's about is
Okay.
already out there. So let's just evaluate the film.
Can we just
on its own merits.
do jump cuts between big sections of the movies and have Toto playing in between, like the Lynch film, where he's like, and then he
No, man.
trained the
Hans Zimmer.
Fremen and they became mighty warriors and go. Like, seems like a lot of stuff is missing there.
All right. Well, see you next week then. Unless we see you
What?
last week.
Next week,
Before.
you see. I can't do it backwards.
Spiding balls